Hello everyone and welcome back to Motorcycle.com. Over there we've got Ryan, over there we've got John. I'm pretty sure I got their names right. I'm Troy. And before we get into what we've got here for this 6-bike comparison, let's take you back a ways. A couple months ago, a couple weeks ago, whatever it's been, all this crazy time we've been dealing with. I don't know what's what anymore. Not too long ago we did a test of 6 650-ish cc middleweight naked bikes. Twin cylinder things like the SV650 Suzuki, Yamaha MT-09, Aprilia Tuono, 660 Triumph Trident, which is not a twin, it's a 3-cylinder. And you know, that was a fun test. We learned a lot of good things about those bikes. I personally love that classic motorcycle, but the plan all along was to step up our game, which, you know, isn't that hard to do considering how low we set the bar, but step up our game and test the next subset of naked bikes, the, what do you want to call this?
Heavier
middleweights? Is that
900 nakeds is kind of close, 900 nakeds.
900-ish cc naked bikes. And so we got 6 more bikes to test, and they are, because I'm sure going to forget them, BMW F900R, the Ducati Monster, the Kawasaki Z900, KTM 890 Duke, Triumph Street Triple R, not the RS, and the Yamaha MT-09. And so we've spent quite a few days now taking all 6 bikes along our various test routes, jotting down copious amounts of notes because we are professionals, and just generally bantering amongst ourselves, trying to figure out which one of these 6 bikes is the best and then where all the others fall from there. And for those of you who are actually going to bother going to Motorcycle.com and reading the written story about this, we do this in a more, I don't know, scientific way. We have a scorecard we fill out, and it's weighted. It actually takes into account both objective measures like price, weight, horsepower, torque, and our subjective feelings like how we like the engine, how we like the chassis, how we like the brakes, yada, 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 yada. So we fill out that scorecard. It generates a bunch of numbers, and we come up with winners and losers. Before we get into how each of the bikes stacked up, Ryan, I think we were talking about this before, compared to those 650-ish twins, all 6 of the bikes we have now are just a cut above those bikes in terms of just how well they're put together, how well they handle, just it's their overall package, right?
You know, all 6 of these bikes is kind of a cut above those other 6 bikes, and you can feel it, you know, out here on bumpy roads when you're leaned over in a corner. A lot of those bikes from the 650 test kind of, you know, had a lot of noodly feelings with them, but everything that we tested here is pretty well stacked for handling these roads. The suspension's better, the frames are typically a little more rigid, you know, you got more power, of course, and yeah, a lot of the components are just a bit of a cut above, I guess. And the price tag's a bit of cut above as well.
Well, I mean, yes, price tags are higher, but you're also getting more motorcycle for the dollar.
Surprisingly, some of them aren't that much more expensive for what you get.
Well, I was going to wait a little bit later to say all this, but since you mentioned it, John, I'll reveal the prices.
Get into it. Let's start at the bottom.
Let's just get into it now. We'll get into the pricing. At the very bottom of the price category, we've got the BMW F900R at $8,995. Moving up from there, the Kawasaki Z900 at $8,999. Up next, Yamaha MT-09 at $93.99. And then, where are we at here with my little cheat sheet? The Triumph Street Triple R, $10,800. Then we've got the KTM 890 Duke at $10,999. And finally, the Ducati Monster is the most expensive bike here at $11,895. So not only does the BMW bring up the bottom of the price barrel, it also brings up the bottom of our test as well, coming in 6th and last place in our test. Ryan, tell them why.
You know, I was actually thinking yesterday on the way home on the BMW, this thing's really not that bad. You know, I was actually thinking to myself, overall it's pretty good. It's only when you put it against the rest of the field that we have here that it starts to show a lot of flaws. I think the only thing for me that really kills the bike is the foot peg placement. which is really high and oddly forward, like right underneath you. That's probably my biggest complaint with it. Unfortunately, it does also make like 84 horsepower to everything else around here is like around 105. So, you know, it makes a lot less power than these. But again, like out here, you know, I was hanging with you guys just fine on that BMW. So it doesn't quite have the power, but it is put together well. It's got a really nice TFT display that's got that mated TFT to the glass, so it's glare resistant, and it's a pretty good motorcycle, you know, in a vacuum. Unfortunately, when you put it against the other 5 bikes here, it starts to show its flaws, and really it kind of highlights how a lot of these motorcycles are better in a lot of ways.
You get past the squatty potty ergonomics of the thing, and the PlayStation it's got for a dashboard. It's got good suspension. It's reasonably comfortable. The engine's kind of got some peaks and valleys.
Yeah, dyno chart shows that.
And it doesn't really make as much power as the other ones, but if you hadn't ridden anything else, you know, it's okay.
86 horsepower, not so great. You look at the dyno graph, it really isn't so great. It peters off pretty quickly. The TFT and the brakes are really nice, but that's probably like its best feature, other than its really cool paint job that really shines in the bright sunlight. The word agricultural just kept popping up in my head. Like, it just sounds so like a tractor. It didn't inspire anything in me except the willingness to get off it. After that, I was kind of reaching for something nice to say about it. You know, again, if you don't get the chance to ride any other bike, it'll be fine. But let's not beat up on the BMW too much more. Let's hop into number 5.
Yeah.
And oof, this is going to be a tough one for John to swallow.
You try to help the kids out, you do your best, you know.
Number 5.
We're talking, of course, about the
lead 'em.
Kawasaki Z900.
Lead a horse to water.
Before Ryan and I get into its less than glamorous traits, why don't you, John, talk about why it's so great?
It'll take less time.
Well, it's got the most horsepower and the most torque.
No.
And it makes 108 horsepower at less RPM than this thing's peak horsepower. And it's just got the best. Can we agree it's got the best engine?
Nope.
No? Okay. All right. Well,
I just moderate.
I kind of think if we're talking nakeds, I think it needs to be not just a good sport bike for riding around Angeles Crest, but a good everyday bike. And I think that's what the Kawasaki is. It's got really good ergonomics for me, kind of like the Yamaha. The handlebars are right here close to you, and the seat's nice and low. It's got a helmet lock. It doesn't have the least trail. It's not the shortest, but it feels like it steers great to me. Suspension's not the best, but with the money you save, because it's almost the least expensive bike here, you could get a new shock for it, or you could afford to do some other things to it. But for me, it just feels like a big bar stool, a real powerful bar stool. You're just, you got remote control here, you got your cocktail over here, and you're just zipping down the road, man.
I agree.
It's got a 4.5 gallon gas tank too. We got done shooting up here yesterday. I made it home to Orange County last night, back to Evans's house in Burbank this morning. I didn't have to stop and fill it up. All these other ones are 3.5 gallons. I just think it's the most practical, and I dig it because of that. It's the spiritual inheritor of the Z900 from many years ago. It's a great motorcycle.
Okay, Ryan, tell him why he's wrong.
Because it is like riding a bar stool, just like he said. No. No, I mean, the Kawasaki, it's thinking back to the last test, there were a lot of bikes or a lot of things about bikes that we really didn't like. And this whole field is all a lot of fun. Like I've had more fun on all 6 of these bikes than I did on most of the smaller ones.
The last 6.
So, but the Kawasaki, the ergonomics feel really cramped. The seat is incredibly low, but it also makes your knees pretty bent, and the whole cockpit just feels kind of crunched up. Motor's smooth, sewing machine smooth. You just you hear it roll by, and it's just humming away, you know, and that's nice. But it, you know, it doesn't have quite as much or any character compared to the rest of these bikes. But yeah, I mean, the suspension is probably the weakest point on the bike after the ergos for me. But I don't know. What do you think, Troy?
Maybe the best And the worst thing I can say about that Kawasaki was that I've got nothing to say about the Kawasaki. Yes, that motor does make a lot of power, and it's, you know,
Smooth too.
smooth and fine, but it's got
Linear.
no character whatsoever.
It gets a little buzzy around 7,000 RPM.
It does get buzzy.
It's kind of
and
nice if you're scooted up close to the tank.
if you like that kind of thing, I guess. This is not that kind of channel, though.
Smoothest 4 cylinders ever.
I rode the thing, and yes, the ergos for me are cramped. I couldn't move in the seat very much. My knees were bent a little bit more than I would like. And yeah, I hop off the thing going, I really don't remember anything about that ride. It was very not memorable. Which, you know, if you're looking for just a motorcycle that'll do the job, do it well, and that's it.
Blow the doors off the other 5 motorcycles?
No, not gonna go there. No. The Kawasaki is perfectly fine and completely not memorable for me. So, you know, sorry, John.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, if you won't have to remember to take it in to get repaired all the time either, because it'll outlast all these Ducatis and KTMs and things probably.
We've got a Japanese-made Yamaha that you're standing right next to.
Yeah, this is a great bike too. I actually ranked the Kawasaki third on my personal scorecard ahead of the Ducati. So
You did.
that's how much I like it. But it's, you know, different people like different things. There's no way around that. I can lead them to water. I can't make them understand.
You ranked it third. Brian has it ranked last in his subjective and personal scoring. Ugh, that's kind of awkward. I have it ranked second to last in my scoring, but either way, it's down there.
Which then leads us into
Number 4.
the top 4, really. I mean, the top 4.
The top 4. That's a good way of putting it. Not
Pretty
a
solid
bottom
bikes.
3.
Yeah.
We're not going to split it in half down the
Yeah.
middle. We're going to call it the bottom 2 and the top 4.
That's kind of the way I feel about
That's
it.
very PC
The
of you.
Kawasaki and the BMW can stay down in 5th and 6th, but the top 4 are all pretty awesome bikes.
Well, let's get into it then.
Get
Coming
into
in
it.
number
What's number
4, the Triumph Street Triple R.
Ooh, the R.
Sounds kind of weird to say, doesn't it? 4th place for the Triumph when that thing has won or came pretty close to winning shootouts in the past. Now, it's worth mentioning again, this was the R model that we tested, not the RS. Part of that is because we have the KTM 890 Duke and not the 890 Duke R. We've already tested the RS and the Duke R together in the past, so, you know, go search for that on Mo. We're trying 2 bikes we haven't ridden that fit into this space really, really well. Nonetheless, 4th place, Triumph Street Triple R. It has the smallest engine in the group at 765 cc, but if you look at the dyno chart, it actually makes the most power, 109 horses. However, it makes that power at like nearly 12,000 RPM. Below that, everything else in this field just smokes it. And yeah, it's kind of a fall from grace, but not because of anything Triumph has done, but because of all the things all the competitors have done in the meantime. Care to elaborate on that, John?
I put the Triumph in 5th because, yeah, it never makes as much torque as the other bikes do. And if you want the horsepower, you got to go to almost 12,000 RPM. And anything above 7 is kind of buzzy up there. It's kind of buzzy. And for me, a naked bike has evolved into a sit-up straight bike. And the Triumph's like a sport bike that they took the fairing off of. So the foot pegs are kind of rearward for me, and the handlebar is a little bit more of a reach than the other bikes. And so it feels more like a sport bike to me, and I don't like to ride it as much around town because it's harder on my anatomy. And it just doesn't quite have the power. I don't like the ergos as much. It's got really good suspension. It's got good brakes. Everything else, it's got, yeah, everything else about it is good, but it's kind of buzzy. It's a little uncomfortable, and that's why I put it down in 5th.
Can't argue with that, Ryan.
Can't argue with it. Yeah, I mean, I think the triple is great. You know, when you're out on these roads and you are revving it up into its power band and whatnot. And it's got a good mid-range too, just not as much as the rest of these bikes. But the chassis is so incredibly stable. The brakes are great. You know, that thing is, in my opinion, I think it was the most stable leaned over. It just, you can't really flip it around as quickly as the 3 bikes that you guys are looking at here. And I think that's kind of, for me, why I ended up 4th. And again, you know, these bikes that we have here are the top 3, but it just goes to show how stacked and how good all this whole class of bikes are, you know. Like the Street Triple is still a great bike, but you know, these are a little greater.
Yeah, it's funny looking at the dyno chart again, and you see that the torque curve for the Triumph is perfect. It's just lower than everything else
10
here.
pound-feet lower.
But like you look at it and just immediately goes like this, straight lines
Smooth.
until red line, and it doesn't get any better than that. It's just that everyone else in this test makes more, and that's kind of hard to beat too. To just elaborate, or just to add to what you guys said, for me, the Triumph, it's got a well-padded seat, but it's not the most comfortable seat. And then the pegs are kind of high too, so you're got this really intense knee crunch going on there. And like you said, John, it's like a sport bike with the fairings taken off and handlebars put on. And, you know, around town, anywhere except the racetrack, I don't want to be revving an engine to 12,000 RPM to get any sort of power out of it. So time has marched on, the Triumph has sort of faded back there, and the 3 bikes you see in front of you now have kind of overtaken it. All right, so that brings us now to the 3rd place finisher in our test.
Coming in at number 3.
Coming at number 3, the Ducati Monster, a new bike for 2021. Some might say it's sacrilege that the Ducati Monster no longer has a trellis frame. I dig it, personally. I think it looks pretty cool. Times change. You just got to move on. And I think, personally, it keeps with the ethos and the original intent of the Ducati Monster. It's a cool little bike.
It lost a bunch of weight in the process too.
Exactly. Lost
So
weight.
that was good.
It's got
Was
the
it like 40
937.
pounds?
I like 40 or
It's like
40
40
something.
pounds.
Yeah,
It
it
was
was
pretty
a lot.
significant.
Getting rid of that
diet.
dumb trellis frame.
You're about to get some pissed off emails there, Ryan, from
Man,
some
what a stupid idea in the first
loyal
place.
Ducati fans. So, John, tell us what you like about the Ducati.
I actually ranked the Ducati 4th. I put the Z900 in 3rd and the Ducati 4th. And the Ducati feels like almost more like a sport tourer to me than a naked bike. Feels a little softer than the other ones. It also puts out quite a bit of heat. It's just not so docile around town. It's slow speeds. The old 90-degree twins just not quite as smooth when you want to smooth down the lane split and stuff. Got to use the clutch a little more. Got to shift gears a little bit more. Other than that, it's very comfortable. When you're giving it the whip and the curves, it's pretty good, but it's a little softer and slower to respond than the others. Just a smidge, I think. And it's also the most expensive bike here, isn't it? Is it almost twice as expensive as my beloved Kawasaki?
Not
quite twice.
I wouldn't go that far.
It's banging on 15,000 bucks, I think.
It's almost 12.
Hold your horses, John. Now you're just
It's under
exaggerating.
12, but
All right.
All right,
take that back.
you've lost the mic, John.
Anyway, it's more expensive than the other ones by quite a bit.
It is.
so.
It is.
But other than that, it's a great motorcycle. I dig it. Take it away.
Take it away, Ryan.
I would tie this seat for top honors with the Street Triple. I know you said you didn't love it, but I actually think the Ducati and the Triumph's seats are the softest for caressing your tuchus.
Springing too, I would
Yeah.
think. Would
Yeah,
be
well,
No,
part of that, isn't it?
they're soft.
Yeah.
They're just not shaped. The
There's not a lot of
Triumph
room to
one isn't
move
shaped
around.
very well.
There's not a lot of room to move around on the bike either if you're trying to scoot back in the seat and whatnot. But other than that, I mean, I really like how torquey, you know, the motor is right off idle and out here and out in tighter roads, you know, that's really nice. But yeah, great bike around town because it kind of sits more upright. You're not canted too far forward, but just enough to deal with the wind blast. And it's a really cool bike. But for me, it's the price thing, you know. Comparing it to like the Yamaha 9400, this is almost 12 grand. Like that's quite a bit of a price gap.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you guys said. I mean, my first time riding the Ducati Monster was for this test when we were first doing our rounds with it. And my very first time riding it, it kind of gave me that bland feeling, that same Kawasaki feeling I had before. Like it didn't stand out to me in any sort of way. But as we did more rotations around and we rode it through different roads and I found the harder I rode it, the more fun it was.
Yeah,
and the more it responds and the more it likes, you know, typical Ducati, it likes being ridden hard, right?
Right.
And the more I did that, the more I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, it doesn't make the most power here, it doesn't make the most torque here, not by far. It's below most of these bikes, actually. But it just has that V-twin character that I still think is really cool. It's the only V-twin in this test. And it just has that something that is really fun to just wind it out and get the most out of. That exhaust heat, though, is just crazy hot.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's crazy hot. There's a lot worse ones. But
There-
of this
yeah,
bunch,
there
it might
Okay,
be the
of this
worst
bunch,
bunch.
it is definitely the hottest. And, like, really? Why?
no
Why are we
doubt.
dealing with that now? It's, well, everyone has complained about Ducati exhaust heat, and they still can't figure that out. It's, I know there's a lot of challenges when designing a motorcycle, but roasting the rider's
I
legs
don't know how to
should
do
be...
it, but there's a better way to do it.
Could it be?
I'm not an engineer, but there's gotta be a better way.
Could it be not putting a cylinder between your thighs?
I mean, the SV650 has a cylinder between your thighs, and it's not roasting your thighs.
Since we're in roast mode for the Ducati right now, too, I want to mention this
Ooh,
headlight.
get 'em, Ryan.
This
You
headlight
hate that
frame
thing.
is already yellowed, and this is a brand new bike. I mean, you can tell the difference between this thing, the plastic of the dash and the frame of the headlight. It's just, it looks like it's 20 years old already. And then, you know, you can feel the seams on these stickers on the gas tank. It is a cheaper Ducati, but it's not a cheap motorcycle. And some of these things, you know, you don't have that on either one of these bikes, really. So, you know.
A yellow spring on an otherwise red motorcycle is kind of weird too.
Well, you know, they just want to make it look sporty.
Yeah, they want to try and copy some Swedish brand out there.
Yeah.
So the electronics on the Ducati are really, really good. I mean, just like the Ducati electronics in general are really good. This Monster, just like the top 4 bikes, all have auto up-down shifters, quick shifters, which, I mean, once you try it, you really can't go back. It's so nice to have. And like I said before, I like the looks of the thing. The harder you ride it, the more fun it is. And yeah, in my mind, it was well enough to place 3rd as a collective group. When you tabulate all the scores together, it earned 3rd place. But boy, oh boy, is that price tag just a deal breaker for pretty much all of us, right?
If you're in the market for a Ducati, that's probably pretty not so bad. You know what I mean?
Coming in 2nd on the collective scorecard here, the bike I'm sitting on, the KTM 890 Duke.
Ooh, didn't think that was going to happen, did you?
Oh boy, that. And just to get it out of the way now,
The scalpel?
obviously now you'll know that the Yamaha won 1st place, but the two are separated on our scorecards by like this much. Not a whole lot. It's a very, very, very thin margin between the Yamaha and the KTM. Ultimately, the Yamaha's price put it over the edge, but we'll get to that in a second. This KTM, 2nd place, 890 Duke, and boy, what a motorcycle this is. This is not the R model, so you don't get the top shelf WP suspension, you don't get the top shelf Brembo brakes, but boy, oh boy, it's pretty darn close everywhere else. You still get the really cool 890cc parallel twin that made 104 horsepower on our dyno, actually on Mickey Cohen Motorsports dyno. Has a really cool sound with the offset firing order. I mean, look at it.
Get off of it.
It looks cool. It looks really cool.
I like
You
the
see it.
stickers.
And in typical KTM fashion, and they're built to, or ready to race mantra, this thing just attacks corner after corner after corner and just wants to be ridden quickly and aggressively, which might be a downside if you're not that kind of person who wants to ride like that.
Yeah, I mean, that thing is, it's so much fun out here, and it just feels so svelte and slim, you know, between your knees. I really like the riding position on it for around town stuff too, because it's really upright. It's not, you know, maybe it's not quite as smooth engine-wise around town at lower speeds. You know, it really does pick up when you're out here is when you're having the most fun with it, but it's still a great bike for around town and lane splitting. It's really nice. It doesn't have the Brembo brakes, but the brakes are still really good on this bike. I think my biggest complaint with the KTM is probably the seat, which I've complained about a lot. It's super hard. And again, like, even though it doesn't have the same suspension as the R model, the suspension on this bike is great too. I mean, it's, in my opinion, it's one of the best. Obviously, that's why it's ranked number 2 out here in the canyon roads. The KTM Duke 890 Duke is definitely one of, I mean, I think I actually did rank it for number 1, so it's a really great bike. I like it a lot for a lot of different reasons.
You sure did. You sure did. John?
I think I kind of split it down the middle. If the best sport bike is that bike, the best do-everything bike is the Yamaha. Just because this one's got the suspension's just a smidge softer on here, especially in the rear. The KTM, the rear shock, when you hit big bumps, it's pretty damn harsh. But it keeps it level when you're riding like a maniac, but it's a little bit more harsh around town. But yeah, if you want to do track days and stuff, that's the bike you want. The KTM's got the kind of good ergonomics that you want in this. Like you're about to start wrestling somebody, you're about to reach out and grab them. And yeah, it's perfect for attacking curves, and it's really good for around town too. But suspension's a little unforgiving around town. Also, I couldn't own it because it looks like a Black & Decker power tool to me. I know we were bagging on the MT-07 the other day. It's not that it looks cheap; it just looks like kind of a tool. I don't really want an orange. I don't know why they can't make a blue one. Why can't they make a different color to give you an option?
They make blue stickers.
I guess there's a black one. Is there a black one?
No,
it's not much of an option either.
Yeah.
Black with
it's
orange.
a lot of orange and a lot of black.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want the pure sport bike, it's the KTM. I don't want ready to race all the time. Sometimes I do, but not all the time.
It's more like ready to lounge, ready to siesta, maybe.
Yeah, ready. It's
Yeah.
time for the hot
Cocktail.
tub. I've flashed up every now and then. It's time for the hot tub now.
Yeah.
It'd be okay.
All right, fair enough.
Glass of wine in the hot tub.
One thing I forgot to mention about this bike, though, regarding the electronics. One, there's a whole suite of electronics. It's not nearly as sophisticated as the Ducati, especially that screen, but it's passable. But it's got supermoto mode.
It does have
Skirt that back end in wherever you
skids
want to.
whenever you want.
Oh boy, is that fun. Is that fun. I really love this motorcycle, the KTM. It's such a fun bike to ride. All kidding aside though, this 890 Duke non-R, because it's come out later than the R version, if you may remember, the 890 Duke R had some weird transmission issues where it was really, really difficult to shift gears with the quick shifter. That's been mostly solved with the non-R model here. You can shift up and down. It's, not as slick as either of these two, the Yamaha or the Ducati, but compared to the R model, the transmission is worlds better on the non-R issue. All right, that's enough about the KTM. Let's jump into our winner of this shindig, the Yamaha MT-09. I could go on and on about this motorcycle, but I won't. I won't yet. I'll let you two take the stage first. And John, since you're standing right next to it, you can go first. Go ahead.
All right. It's got great ergonomics. It's got a great seat. It's wide back here, so when you're going down the freeway above the legal limit, you can slide back and lean in the wind a little bit. When you're attacking the curves, you slide up the front where it's nice and thin, so it's easy to touch the ground. But you see the shape of the gas tank, but it's very wide at the front and nice and narrow here to get your knees in there, so you can slide up to the front. And the foot pegs are in a really good spot, just like on the KTM for attacking curves. You're in that attack position. And it's great around town too. It's the suspension, like the first 1/8 of an inch is a little bit easier than on the KTM, and it absorbs bigger hits better. I think the shocks got rebound adjustment too. It's got almost as much power as the Kawasaki. It's got same torque as the Kawasaki, about 1,000 RPM or so lower in the power band. So it's got a real broad range of power. It's pretty smooth most of the time. Not quite as smooth as the Kawasaki, but very close. And it's a nice motorcycle. Oh, what I really like about this,
Go on.
not this one, but if you got the SP version, then it would make it the same price as the KTM. If you got the SP, then you would get cruise control and only in suspension too. And we couldn't get that one, I guess, but if I was going to get one, that's the one I'd get. Then it'd be a good traveling bike, as well as a great do-everything bike too.
Cruise control's a game changer.
I mean, the motor on that bike is what does it for me. That triple is fantastic. No one was shooting anything today, and I was just running back and forth through the tunnels just to listen to the motor sing, you know. And with that quick shifter, I think I don't know, in my opinion, I think the Yamaha and the Ducati probably have the best quick shifters out of this group. But it sounds great, you know, when you're giving it the whip and top cog through the tunnels. And
Giving it the
With
berries.
the stock exhaust too.
with the stock exhaust, yeah, it's a great sounding bike for sure. And it just, you know, once you get into that kind of mid-range power, it pulls so hard up to the red line, and it's really a lot of fun. The suspension, I guess, you know, it is softer, and you know, I probably would want to adjust the shock on that a little bit, even for the stuff that we've been doing today.
Which
but
we can
then,
do.
yeah, but then around town, you know, it's super comfortable. And again, the upright ergonomics definitely make it just easy to look around when you're in town, carry your groceries, whatever you got to do, carry your significant other, whatever you got to do. It's
Whatever.
a good bike, good all-around bike, and the price point puts it, you know, in the top spot within these 6 machines. So
For sure. I know for me, when I rode the MT-09 for the very first time during our little rotations here, I actually forgot it had a bigger engine. I was expecting that 847 triple from before. Hop on it,
Bigger.
twist the throttle, and suddenly I'm just rocketing forward, and I'm like, what? Holy cow. This is not the MT-09 I remember from before. And then it dawned on me, oh yeah, dummy, bigger engine. Sounds great. Obviously, 3 cylinders have that really cool sound. And now with the bigger engine, more power, more torque, it's such a fun engine to rip around on. Chassis-wise and suspension-wise, it doesn't quite attack the corners like the KTM does, but it's not too far off. And when you're riding around town, that seat's way more plush than the KTM. The suspension is more plush than the KTM for around town stuff too, or the freeway or what have you. It's just a really good overall package. Looks-wise, that front headlight's a little weird, but it actually has been growing on me the more I see this bike and look at it and have it in my house sometimes. The other thing I was really surprised by was the quick shifter. Like Ryan was saying, it's really, really good. Up or down, like I'm genuinely surprised how good the Yamaha changes gears without the clutch. It's funny, I'm riding the Yamaha around and it's a ton of fun, and I'm whacking the throttle open, doing silly things that maybe we shouldn't be doing. And this entire ride, I've been thinking to myself, how cool would an R9 be? Yamaha. You just made an R7 based on the MT-07. How cool would the R9 be based on one of these things?
you heard it here first.
You heard it here first, guys. R9, Yamaha, make it happen. This thing is cool. It would be super cool on an R9 platform. All those things, and the price, what, $9,400 or whatever it is? Significantly cheaper than the KTM, like $1,600 cheaper. You can get some pretty good suspension for that and be every bit as capable as this KTM and still have cash to buy a burger at the end. It's, the Yamaha's cool. I dig it a lot. I think we all collectively dig it a lot. And when you tabulate both the objective and subjective scores together, this is what you get. The Ducati in 3rd place, the KTM in 2nd place, and taking top honors is the Yamaha MT-09. Boys, this was a fun test to do. So like I said before, there is going to be a written portion of this test. You can find it at Motorcycle.com. There you'll find Evans Brassfield's photos, which are usually spectacular. Scorecard that we mentioned before, you can see how we tabulate things. More of our written opinions there. And, you know, if you're watching this on YouTube, I don't know how else you would be, go browse around the other videos and check out the other stuff we've done, including the 650 middleweight twins naked bike test. So you can kind of get an idea as to not exactly what we're comparing these to, but what the lower subset as far as price goes and displacement goes in the naked bike category. You can compare and contrast and hopefully get a better understanding of what these things are all about. So that's it from us, and yeah, till next time, ride safe.
You didn't tell them to crunch that like button.
Crunch it.
Crunch that like button.
Crunch it. Crunch that like button.